like StreamYard. Decent music. Welcome back, everybody. Unfound Adventures, Facebook Live, Ask Us Anything. We are going to be talking about origin novels. We're going to be talking about what we've been doing the last couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about why Matt can't show up on time when we send him the link, why it takes him at least 10 to 15 minutes. I almost ended stream. All right, we're going to stop that. Welcome, everybody. As you're coming in, whether you're watching us live, whether you're watching the replay, let us know who you are in the comments. Tell us where you live. Tell us your favorite color. Tell us what path you'd be walking right now in Bastunia. Would you be walking a defender path? Would you be walking a builder path? Would you be walking an explorer path if you lived in defender? Throw it in the comments. Tell us what path you're walking. Tell us what your calling would look like. I have hung out with enough kids lately where they are so confident. Thank you very much for people coming in. We appreciate you. Love you, Mom. I've been talking to so many kids lately that are so confident to be like, this is what it looks like, that you should have the guts to say what your calling would look like, to remind you what it is you want to do right now. Tell us what it is in the comments. Stop making fun of my mom. Hello, everybody. Dillon here in Michigan. Matt not showing up on time. Matt, where the heck are you right now? I didn't say it. Where the heck are you right now?
I didn't hear it. I'm in Nashville, and I was 3 minutes early. And if you're not 3 minutes early, you're late.
And for anyone curious, anytime that we all get together, I send these guys a StreamYard link, and it's an ongoing joke that from the moment I send the link to Matt, it will be, even if we've been texting and he's like, where's the link? No matter what, no matter where he is, it will take at least 12 minutes for him to show up. That's what it was today. And Evan.
Dylan.
As always. How are you doing, man?
Can you hear me? I'm not too muted. I'm like extra far from my mic right now.
Super clear.
Really clear.
Super clear. All right. I'm all right. I'm pretty crispy, to be honest, but I'm good. Hanging in there. It's post GDC season here in San Francisco, which is always a very busy time for me, which is great because I have no capacity to be busy anymore since I've had my second child.
Hey, so first question,
used to that.
I'm coming through the comments right now. First question that we have in the comments: what is GDC season in San Francisco?
GDC is the Game Developers Conference. It happens every year. It is the largest, probably, with the exception of something like E3, which I don't even think that happens anymore. It is the largest convention of game development, game art, any kind of game-related asset creation or development. Professionals in the country. I don't know if that sentence made sense. I started it a long time ago, but it brings with it a lot of independent studios coming to town in order to make connections and build pitch decks and drum up interest in new projects, and as well as a lot of industry heavy hitters who come to town to be a part of the convention and give talks or meet up and coming professionals, whatever the case may be.
What was the coolest thing that you saw, whether up and coming, no one knows about it, or like big name thing while you were there?
I mean, I usually don't actually go anymore. I certainly didn't this year, but people know me and will come to me for work. But I got to meet Tim Schafer, which was a really, really awesome thing for me. Big hero of mine. If anyone's not aware, he is the writer and creator behind the first two Monkey Island games and a lot of the early awesome LucasArts adventure titles. So yeah, that was fun. Psychonauts, I think, is what he's known for nowadays.
Had me at Psychonaut. If you're also coming in, you have any questions about drawing, about the GDC, about Evan's background, about Matt's background, about our story, this isn't Ask Me Anything. So feel free to ask. If you do not ask us questions, I have a list of questions that I was asked recently by a photographer / videographer that I'm going to ask Matt. So Matt is going to be answering questions while Evan draws. So the first thing I want to talk about, though, today is what the heck is Evan drawing?
Good question.
Even he wants to know. This comes to Matt. So I'm going to tee you up, Matt. Matt has been working
Sure.
on an origin novel, for those that don't know, called
Harbinger.
or Harbinger. Really depends on how you want.
Your choice.
No, it definitely doesn't.
It's Harbinger. Dillon didn't know how to say it. Called Harbinger. It is going to be the origin of the world of Estunia. We're going to talk about kind of its early savior, a guy named Argus, and what he's going through currently, what he kind of works his way into. So in the first book, from what I know, from what I've read, Argus is living in the land of Sophistra, which is part of what they call the Mind Tribe back then. So currently we have builders, explorers, defenders. Back then we had the Mind Tribe, the Body Tribe, and the Heart Tribe. And we are getting a taste of the Mind Tribe, called the Sophistra, who Argus desperately wants to be a part of. He's going through these trials to become an originator, not an originator. I'm sorry, Matt. Right below originator is a
celebrant.
I was going to say it too. To become a celebrant and study under these originators, these highly intellectual matriarchs of this society. So he's going through the trials to become a celebrant so he can be with the in crowd. And in the process, he goes through a bunch of turmoil. He learns more about where he's at and where he's from. But Matt, specifically, where Evan's drawing a scene today. What is the scene Evan is drawing?
Yeah. Okay.
Casey.
So
we love you, Casey. Casey showing up for 15 minutes. I had.
Casey, what's up, man?
We love you.
Glad you're here. Yeah. On the acknowledgments page of this new book, newest edition, Casey Kinsey. Let's hear. Give it up. Give it up.
Yeah, he's got high values.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he works his values. Okay, so this story, the reason that we're heading to this setting, this is like as far off the beaten path, more or less, in this world that you can get. This is a location selected by a group of people who were fleeing from an original settlement to try to hide themselves away so that they could protect their more or less academic institution from the galactic threat. There's this original place. We're in like year 35, so this is pretty early in the settlement of this world. There's an original place that they touch down and they build their city. This city starts to become just riddled with attacks from Zigra left and right, and they're like, we are all doomed if we stay. So out of fear, out of a desperate attempt to put themselves somewhere where they could be safe, they pack up and they head to this beach, which is like basically on the other side of weeks and weeks of traveling across this desert. And they find themselves in this area on the coast, this like crescent shape of land that's actually quite fertile. This Garden of Eden type place that they can then settle. So there's, I don't know how many of them. There's probably 50 or so people that are part of this Sophistra, this academic institution, that they settle in this place. And so you end up in this crescent of beach. This crescent of beach with like hill country, grassy hill country surrounding it. There's a bunch of lakes. It's quite paradise-like. I mean, you'd stumble upon this thing, you feel quite lucky that you did. And they see these signs of these massive creatures that once lived in this place, but they're, as far as they can tell, they're not there anymore. And one of the massive things, the massive structures they see, is this giant shell laying on its face. It's like a set of shells lying on their face on the beach. So when they start looking for a place to gather, when they start looking for like an auditorium type place, that when they're all assembled, the originators, the higher ups, the matriarchs can then dispel their teachings to giant groups of people. The bivalves is what they call them, which is just another name for this type of shell in this shape, is where they assemble. It's kind of this perfect structure that has these little tiers, these platforms. The top of the shell, this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but like the anatomy of the shell, the very point of it is called the beak. The beak provides this like area for the originators to gather and speak down to the different the lower levels of their academic body. The beak, yeah. There's the
I don't
beak.
know if I've been trying to do my best to like listen to you, and then I'm just typing typing Dillon's terms to everybody else. So we
Cool.
get your elegant words and then my like to the point. Side note, my dad's here and he's excited to watch the Red Wings tonight with me and my son. It's nothing to do with what
Yes.
you just said, Matt.
I wish I was there too. Doug would be up there near the top, near the beak.
Well, James didn't live back in this time. I'm actually going to show a picture, by the way. Quick side note. My dad thinks he's James, which he's not, but he does. His middle name is James, and he used to be a big macho man. So I guess. I just spoke at a school that my sister works at as a teacher, and every kid that she's been reading my comic to swears that she is Joan. And it's wild because I'm not even the one drawing this guy. Like, it's just me. It's Evan through what I describe these people as that draws people that look just like my family members. So we're gonna do pictures. We'll do pictures in the Facebook group of old school Doug and James, and you'll tell me if they're the same. And then we're gonna do current Nicole and Joan, and we're gonna see if they look the same. So get ready for those polls, and let us know. Back to the story though. So we're basically on the beach, past a bunch of desert. This mine tribe, this Aphistra, find this area, and there's these giant creatures. Now, when you say giant creatures, clearly these shells do not exist or are not living right now. What do you mean
Yeah.
by giant creatures?
So they see evidence of giant creatures, and some of this has to be like inferred based on the observance of the smaller versions of these creatures. Now, it just appears that over time you've gone from something that's really massive to something that is maybe what we would recognize it as today.
Got it.
Like, you want other examples?
No, I mean, no, I'm trying to set the scene too in my mind,
Yeah.
and then Evan's obviously drawing it. But I basically see this beach, this vast ocean that we're overlooking, and then on this beach is this giant shell.
Let's talk about Ubuntu in a second. Go ahead.
Hello, left turn.
No. It's relevant.
Okay, so we see this giant shell that people go to. That's kind of like an auditorium, right? It's kind of like, I think of like almost like this concert venue in a sense, but it goes the other way. You're looking up at this giant stage. At the beak of this shell is where those that are holier than thou look down on people, and at the base of it is where you see these aspirants, people that are aspiring to be closer to them. Correct?
Yeah.
Got it. Is there anything else before we go to Ubuntu? I'm sorry. Is there
Yeah.
anything else, what I just said and saw, is there anything else you'd want to say to paint that picture for Evan to start to draw this scenery?
I've started.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
He's into it.
I've started. I don't know where you guys are.
I was talking about, you're right. Continue. Anything else that you feel it's supposed to be in that scene, Matt?
Yeah, one thing that's behind the shell is this giant promontory. Let's see, try to think of a Dillon word. Big rock.
Cliffs.
Big craggy rock.
Thank you.
Cliffs. Yeah, cliffs. So that
Right.
would be an area that at one point in the story, the originators end up on top of that. So that would be relevant. And then it's right past the shell. There's a lagoon. And so sort of calm ocean waters.
Love it.
There
Got
you go.
it. Promontory, craggy rock cliffs. There is also a lagoon and calm ocean waters.
Yeah, this would have been a real good conversation to have before this call, but I'm going for it.
Oh, this guy already starts his excuses. Evan, you know by now that what we
Yeah.
do, we basically put you on the spot more and more and more and more every time we get on these calls.
One day I'm gonna go down in flames because of you two.
Hey, man, you and me both. I already said to both of these guys, like, trying to wrangle these two is going to
we
be the
all
death of me.
Look, we all feel this way. We all hate each other and love each other simultaneously.
When mother calling and a father calling, no. Matt, you said, as Evan continues to draw this, if you have any questions about the world, about the lore, about the origin novel, feel free to ask. Matt, you said you want to talk about Ubuntu. Do you want to talk about Ubuntu specifically in this time?
Sure, but actually, specifically what I wanted to talk about regarding Ubuntu is uh, I look around when a character in Bastunia looks around the world and they see things like a giant shell, and they try to make inferences about uh, based on what they see, like what does it say about the god of this world? Uh, this setting, like these giant shells, I think, paint this image of this god who has a mastery of uh, living creatures, as a mastery of creatures in general.
Hmm.
And you see this now, throughout the story with callings, is clearly Ubuntu has some mastery over creatures. But even in the reason these are relevant in the lore of this story, in the lore of the world, is like a clam or something like this. They're like filter feeders. So if you were to have a mastery over creatures and you wanted to find a way, let's say you found a planet that was just like a little bit gunked up, a little bit dirty,
Hmm.
then maybe what you would do is you'd take these giant filter feeding creatures and you would plant them all over the beaches, and you plant them all over the world, and systematically, like, what tools does our God have at his disposal? Creatures. And so he's going to use different things, different beasts, different creatures to assemble the world into something that'll someday be habitable for mankind.
Yeah. So, like, really, gods in the Unfound Adventures universe, they're really like architects, which is you see something, it's like, how would I create? How would I like bring about a society or bring about life on this rock? You're basically saying Ubuntu would be like, hey, what creatures, what animals or creatures could I put on here to help shape this world?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm actually a little upset at how quick Evan was able to like hear Matt and be like, "Yeah, here's water and a bivalve." So Evan, when you're creating scenes, because we typically see you create people or callings,
I'm
what are
pissed
like,
too.
and you, hey, he swore first, Evan. If you want to make a quick note,
I'm very upset.
what is it? Because Evan, you say that when you start drawing humans, when you start drawing callings or creatures, you're using basically different shapes, right? Is it the same thing when you're doing
Yeah,
landscape?
yeah, it's very much shape language. Landscapes or illustrations. There's a whole lot of other battles. I always put this in combative terms. I don't know why, but there's a whole lot of battles that need to be fought before you get to a point where you're making something look really pretty. And most of that is focused on getting a decent shape language and getting a decent read just from value, which is really all we're working in here, black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And so this shell in the background could have easily looked just like a normal size shell.
Mm-hmm.
But, one of the ways in which I try to make it pull back in space and appear giant is with, reference points like, this rock outcropping is clearly considerably closer to us. This one is clearly right in the foreground. And all of that is kind of achieved by this fall off in value. Things get lighter as they recede in space as a result of something called atmospheric perspective. And certainly as we get beyond this like color key phase into real painting, then we'll have the opportunity to incorporate things like detail and a lot more specific visual information. But yeah, everything starts from general shapes and just making sure that things read well enough at a very small size. It was called a thumbnail size. So if you
Do
reduce an
you
image to the size of your thumbnail and it reads, it's successful. If it doesn't matter how much detail or color you throw at it, it's not going to work.
yeah.
And for the record, I don't think this one is there yet, but it's getting there.
Again, like it was so quick how you started putting it together, and it's wild for me as like because I've been reading this. As the next question I'm going to ask for you, Matt. This is a novel that we're going to read that you put together. It's over 300 pages. Real quick, real quick. We will promise we will get to this question. We're reading a 300 plus page novel with this origin story. It's incredible. I'm almost to the end, right? And as I'm reading, it's very difficult for me to put a picture in my head. And then Evan puts this together, and I'm like, it's crazy that I start going back in the story. I'm like, oh, so this, and then this, and now I'm seeing this, and now I'm seeing how they come back on land from this larger trek. Matt, this though is going to be a novel, but we're writing a picture for it. Where do you see these pictures going in a novel?
Meaning, like at the beginning of a chapter. I think that's what you mean.
Yeah, is that where you'd see them? Is that where you'd want them?
Yeah, I think generally that would be a good placement for them. Ultimately, though, what's tough is if we were to try to plant one at the beginning of every chapter, then there's maybe opportunities missed to capture like the most iconic settings, things that are not coming until later in the chapter.
Hmm.
And so if you were okay with glimpsing where the story was heading in an image before you ever got there, you probably would love that. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but
I'd be curious Evan's thoughts, right? Because it's like if you put a picture like this at the beginning of a chapter, do you try to set that picture up from the chapter we just read? And now we're seeing a picture at the beginning of a chapter, or is this going to set the stage for what you're about to read into, in your artistic opinion?
I do think it works to set the stage, but that can be used to your advantage. It's a good way you can utilize it as a means to surprise readers. You can be suggestive with illustration and make it clear at one point in time when a reader is starting the chapter that this is what they're looking at, but then make it clear once they read into the chapter that they're looking at something else altogether. And that could be, something as simple as dramatic irony, like you're able to reinterpret a scene in a different way based on, new information that you've read. Or, a scene that right now might just look like, oh, that's a cool image of giant clams, suddenly has import. And it gives you that little bit of cognitive delight to literally flip back to the beginning of that chapter and sort of reapproach your understanding of that image. So, I mean, for me, there's potentially a joy in that, but I get why, you might not want to make it a thing to backtrack in your book, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is Matt's creation here. So who am I to be an authority figure on this? You know what I mean? But as I'm taking all this in, it's like it would be good for like how my brain processes things of like, oh, here's the scene. What am I seeing here? And then be able to like it, but it at least puts that initial imprint in my mind for what I'm about to read. But I could also see is like that picture basically summarizing what I just read. Do you lean one way or the other, Matt, right now? Because this is more of a new concept that we've had in the last
Yeah.
week or so.
I'm thinking back to our conversation a couple weeks ago where we were talking about the expectation of a reader and and not wanting to accidentally um, set an expectation and then betray it. Like if there were pictures at the beginning of the first 5 chapters and then chapter 6, they're like, where is it? Um, so I think that was
That's
your.
a very nice way of saying I don't draw fast enough.
Yeah,
Evan,
got it,
everything is looking into
yeah.
us, him looking into us yelling at him. No.
Yeah,
Um,
that's exactly it. No, it's just wanting to, yeah. I think my instinct is to say, put an image near where the description for the thing would be, maybe a little bit ahead, so they can see it and then they read about it and they have it. The minimum effort that a reader could put into actually imagining something. There it is.
Would that then be, and then real quick, I'm going to tell you if you tell me who said it, because right now it just comes up as Facebook user, and I'll tell you when the book comes, I promise.
That's Cam Babcock.
Oh, Cam, cool. For anyone curious, also real quick, happy birthday, Cam. Happy birthday, Cam.
Happy birthday,
Appreciate
man.
you as my neighbor.
You did it.
You really did it.
Bud.
Another year around the sun. Cam,
Right.
books are right now they're being final flatted. And we're getting proof copies. We're basically telling our printer next week for our proof copies. We'll get proof copies. Probably the following week. All of that to say, end of April, early May is when we're shooting for having books. So if anyone here is watching, when do I get my book from the third Kickstarter? We're looking at end of April, early May. So hope that answers your question. Coming back to this, I have one more question for Matt, and I'm going to have one question for Evan, and then Matt, I'm going to pummel you with questions that I was asked by our videographer. So if we did put this in the beginning, because I guess my question would be, it's kind of difficult to like set something up. It's like, do you put that picture in the middle of a chapter? Right? It's a lot of formatting that could go into it. So let's say the best space is right when a chapter starts, right? Because you typically have, like, if you look at a page like this, you'll have chapter 1 and it starts here. We have this open space. Would then every picture want to be a scene early in that chapter? Or would you say, let's put a picture in the middle of a page halfway through a book? It's amazing.
As we're talking about this, I think, from a formatting perspective, having the chapter heading, the number, and then the words start the second half of the page and the top of the page, or however large the illustration is, can take up that half, the upper half, or the majority. I like that idea. We would just end up, and this is fine with me, like, as we decide which illustrations to do, we just make sure that there's not going to be any spoilers in the illustration. If there is a little bit of a spoiler, it could be like this reason to read ahead, this like little teaser. Like, you see these two people lined up in a battle, and you're like, how do I get from here to a battle?
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to read ahead.
It's kind of like when you finish a chapter and you're like, ooh, I can't go to bed yet. Sometimes it's like, well, if I look ahead, it's like, what's the scene that comes in the next chapter? And we can leave it vague enough. Like, we're not showing who's in the battle, right? But vague enough where it's like, hey, I want to get to it because clearly a battle scene's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. It'll be something that we maneuver and manage. So anyone else curious, first off, we're very excited. Cam, this is reading through the third book. It's my favorite book to read through. I love the different lighting. We're a lot of like around the campfire scenes. I showed a couple of those on my wall and on the in our group's wall. It's really, really good. And then we're going back and forth because we want to make sure this novel, 300-page novel, is formatted properly, it's edited properly, it's got these pictures in it. The novel might come out more towards like the June time. Matt and I are going back and forth with what we want to do with that right now. We will keep you in the loop, but you will get the novel. You're going to get probably the comic first. So very excited about that. 1 second. Casey wants to say, I think these would be great as chapter heads and standalone images throughout chapters. Make Evan just do all the art. I like that. Casey, I really do.
50 images.
How many do you want to do, Evan? All right, so my question now for Evan, because it's like we basically said bivalve, huge bivalve on a beach, and you like were like, all right, yeah, here you go. You put this together, and there's a big part of me that's like, cool, you're done. What are like it almost seems like the idea of it can come really quick. Now what is it that you're trying to focus on in a picture like this to bring it to life?
It's not done. I'm focused on finishing it. So yeah, the idea can come quick, and in a perfect world, we'd stress test this idea. I'd work on 10 to 20 maybe different compositions for this, because there's a lot of wiggle room for it. And it's, giant bivalves make for a really interesting shape you can experiment with as like a big landscape feature. But, assuming that this idea is the one we're going to go with, which probably it is for brevity's sake, then, next is really just detail. We're not really investing in color with these images, so that actually saves a ton of work. But things like cleaning up a lot of detail, so it makes it makes for a more involved read where appropriate. That's not to suggest that detail is like the end goal of a finished image. If anything, detail economy is being very deliberate and careful about where you focus your detail, where you consolidate your detail, and where it falls away. So things like that. There are definitely still value shifts that need to be pushed and pulled a bit more. The indication that water is going to need a lot of work, but yeah, I think the general idea is there. I'd be interested to hear Matt's take on it, given that this is his concept that he and I haven't really talked about at any point. Thank you, Casey, for the reminder. I'd love to hear Matt's take on it, and especially when it comes to like these buildings in the near midground here. I'm just kind of pulling that out of nowhere. There's no indication from Matt, as far as what he's given me, that there should be people living on this beach or structures anywhere in this scene or anything like that. If we'd pulled in closer, I would have put people on the bivalve itself, or maybe done something. Let me get a different brush real quick. Maybe done something like a vertical composition where we've got, one bivalve in the foreground, and you can see, somebody standing on it holding a staff, generic video game concept art character. And then behind it, you can really see the shape of the giant other bivalve to kind of set up the visual language for this giant shell in the background, and try to carry that into this very dark generic shape in the foreground to bring your understanding to, oh, this is actually somebody standing on another one of these things. But I'm not going to really try that idea because we don't have the scope to really dig into it. But it might be fun to explore, or if I tried it as like a loose sketch, maybe it's something that would make it into the book in another capacity. But all that is to say, with closer scale on this image, I would try to bring in all of the people actually gathering on this shell and using it for its purpose as a gathering place. But I thought that for a chapter heading and a more establishing shot, it would be more important to show just how big these really are, and sort of how they loom over the life of people in this tribe.
Yeah, Matt, your thoughts? You're the one kind of envisioning this as you write. And real quick, for anyone that's joined us, what we're doing right now is we're drawing a landscape for Matt's upcoming origin novel that takes kind of our savior story of the beginning of Bastunia and his trials through this tribe that he's a part of called. Matt, as you see this, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah. First of all, I think it captures every element of my own imagination and what appears in the story, and so we check that box really well. And then I think that within my vision, there's always allowances for another person's vision to come in and advance color in the details, like where I would see just an empty beach, just not for a lack of not in any deliberate sense, like this is a beach and there's nothing else on it except for shells. It's just like, what are the elements that are really core to the story? And I've told the story first person, past tense, through the eyes of Argus, and so it's also, what has Argus looked at? What has Argus commented on? He doesn't get in the habit of just standing on the dunes and looking out over the ocean and being like, look at all this stuff. There's a headland, and then there's a fill in the blank, and so some of this is just like if there was a overlook structure, man-made, on top of this craggy rock, it never gets discussed in the story. Can it exist? And am I okay with it existing? Sure. Argus just has no reason to describe it, to visit it, to care about it. Just not that important. I think that's this like sailboat looking thing in the sky, right? Is that what
Yeah.
your intention was with this?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, and that can stay, and I'm good with that. It adds a. I love the idea of, like, when you read book 3 and you see the comic and then you see the prose, that there are things in both versions uh, that are only discovered if you read both versions. One example is there's a scene. I won't steal the pleasure of you hunting for these Easter eggs, but there's a scene early on within the first couple pages where James is like stretching. That's all I'll say. And in one version you see something, and another version you don't. And then later there's a different sort of reveal. That's saying enough that if you are paying attention, you can easily find out. So these images, in a sense, it's like it makes me feel that the world is much more richly imagined than you even see in the story, and the only way that you can see it all is if you enjoy both versions.
Would you almost say then you're not the total authority on this story, and others could tap into it with their own creativity if they chose?
Totally.
Cool. As Evan, so what? We're gonna shift
Segue.
now. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us. We like having a good time. Is there any other things you're gonna want to give Evan as he starts? So what I'm gonna basically do right now is have Evan go back to working on this as I ask you questions, Matt. Is there anything else that comes up you'd want Evan to know as he goes back to work on this? Speak now or forever hold your authoritative peace.
The only
Perfect.
detail that there we go. Ubuntu, yep. We gotta put a smiley. So the only detail that I think is very relevant to the story, if this can come out, great. I think it is implied in the values right now, but is imagine when the originators are standing at the beak, that they are and there's 7 different dedications, these like different subjects that people can study, and each dedication is going to be lined up in a sort of like septet beneath the originators. So your figurehead is above you. Next below the originator would be the celebrants, the people they've risen as high as they can rise. And then there's acolytes, and then there's neophytes, and then there's aspirants below that. But there's only ever aspirants when there's like an active trial going on. Once the trials are over, the lowest of the low, the entry level is the neophytes. And there's this imagery of, when you're a neophyte, you're not like sitting up here in a box seat, enjoying the view really comfortably. In fact, you're kind of like perched down in the bench seating. There's not benches, but like very narrow platform, this very narrow tier, where the higher tiers are more like balconies. The mid tiers are like smaller platforms, and the low tiers are like, you and your beast are pretty much in this like 3 or 4 foot ledge. You're not going to be super comfortable. Whether or not we articulate that in this image, just to show, hey, this gets kind of steep. When you're new, the spirit of your newness is like, this is a bit contentious. You're going to need to fight for your place in this thing. You're not comfortable just because you got in. Congrats, you got in. Now the real work begins. That's just that. That's not like a a design instruction so much as like, this is kind of the feeling of being in this setting.
But really, it's like on the bivalve, there's there's a 4 or 5, depending on it, 4 or 5 tier system that almost shows the hierarchy of this society, where you're comfortable looking down on people literally at the top, and you are fighting you are fighting for your place in this society at the bottom.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Would the lowest of the low be on the beach itself, or would they also be on the bivalve? Because that's like, is there 4 or 5 layers to this? Is basically the question there.
There's 5 layers that are utilized, whether or not there's 7, 8, but there's 5 real tiers that people assemble. And then the people that the creatures that would be on the beach would be like, if somebody's beast was a giant like hippo-esque creature, you're not going to try to fit that thing on a small little tier. And so there's like giant beasts that would be gathered below.
Wow, who would have a giant hippo calling? Read for
I don't know.
more. So basically that's the only thing that I'm hearing is like that 4 to 5 tier system on the bivalve. Cool. Look at this.
Donna Lisa. What's up, Donna Lisa?
That's
My
sweet.
God,
Look,
it's so good to have you here. Oh
we-
man, I missed you, Donna Lisa.
I literally just read that and I felt good, and that's perfect that it's coming from Donna Lisa, because that would be someone that makes people feel good. Thank you, Donna Lisa, for being here. Back at you. All right, let's back at you. All right. So with that said, with those final instructions over to Evan, 4 to 5 tier system on the bivalves to show the hierarchy of society potentially, we are going to shift gears while Evan draws, and I am going to interview Matt. So for those that don't know, this last Kickstarter, you had the option to sponsor a classroom visit of ours. We had more people sponsor that than I thought. I initially thought we had like 4 or 5 people. It turned out to be like 7 or 8 people. So we have now spoke at 5 elementary schools. Some of them were just a few classes. Some of them were kindergarten to 5th grade. The feedback we've been getting from teachers and kids has been amazing. And those testimonials will be shared not only on our website, but also in our Facebook group. And also, side note to Matt and Evan, I met our first fan out in the wild yesterday. I took Morgan. I just got a promotion at work. So Morgan, Keith, my son, and I went out to eat yesterday. I'm like, let's treat ourselves and go out to this place called Casey's. It's like this kind of like pizza bar joint. We're sitting there eating. A couple of our friends came in, said,
Please
hi.
tell me you ran into Casey. At Casey's.
I wish I ran into Casey at Casey's.
Did you bend any ears when you were in
there? I asked, and people looked at me confused. I had this, like, literally I was sitting there and people were looking at Keith. Obviously he draws a lot of attention because he's a really cute baby. And this like young girl was looking over at our table, and she's looking at Keith. I'm like, isn't he cute, kind of thing? And I go back to having my conversation. And like 20 minutes later, I get this tap on my shoulder, and it's this little girl. And she's like, are you Dillon Barr? And I was like, food in my mouth. And I'm like, yeah. She goes, you spoke at my class. I was like, oh, that's so cool. She's like, I won one of the books. I'm reading the first book. I love it. She's like, I'm an explorer. And she like tells me what her calling looks like. It's a monkey-like calling. But you could tell like her mom was like glowing because her kid's getting outside of her comfort zone. So 1, it felt awesome to have that. And then 2, Matt, you'd like this because it's something we eventually want to do. It's like she kind of passed a challenge that an explorer would do. She got outside of her comfort zone. Herself. So I went to my car. I had 1 book in the trunk of book 2 that I had an extra one. And I brought it in and I signed it. And I walked up to her mom and her dad. And I'm like, well, your daughter said that she's an explorer. And this is what an explorer is in our world. And explorers get outside their comfort zone. And I saw that you got outside your comfort zone to come say hi to me. Like she was playing with her shirt the entire time. And I'm like, I wanted to give you a reward. And I gave her book number 2. And she just lit up. Her mom got all emotional. It was just really cool to see the impact that we're making in a small area. All of that to
Amazing.
say, we hired a photographer and videographer to kind of capture what we do with these schools and what we do with teachers, with the kids, and kind of so we can see the experience y'all are sponsoring when you sponsor our Kickstarters, right? And the videographer had an idea. He's like, hey, is it okay if I interview you? And we just kind of set up some cameras, and I'll interview you so I could, put this over the B-roll of the experience of what y'all are building? And I said, sure. So he interviewed me earlier this week, and he asked me a bunch of questions of what we're doing. And I thought it was cool, but I'm the only one that got to answer the questions. So for the last 15 minutes, so it's not just me that gets to answer these questions, I am going to ask those same questions to Matt, and we'll see how Matt would answer these. And maybe one day we use these to give to our videographer as well. So that being said, Matt, are you ready to be interviewed by me?
I think so.
Cool. Let's dive in. Are you an authority? No. So question number one, we started off high level. Who are you and what is it that you do? And clearly we're talking about this. I don't want your life story. Who are you and what do you do, Matt?
My name's Matthew Emery. I write the prose for each of the comic books. I'm writing and creating the origin novel series. It should be a trilogy. The title I gave myself in the welcome email was Worldsmith.
Nice. As a pun on wordsmith, but to write about the world.
You got
it. I love it. Question number 2, Matt. What is Tales of Bestunia?
Yeah. Man, that is a good question. Where do you like 2 sentences? Tell me what.
You can give me 5. If we're here, anyone here that doesn't know Matt, we used to be on a similar. We used to be in a workspace together, and I would run these meetings, and I would ask people like questions of like, "Hey, you just had a really good week. How'd you do it?" And the joke that we'd always have for like, if you ask Matt, like, "What did you do?" Like, you could quickly teach us. Matt would start and be like, "So I was going on a walk in the woods the other day, and I came across this pond." And we're like, dude, how does this relate to sales? Like, finish up. So I will allow you to go on a walk in the woods, Matt, when I ask this question. What is Tales of Bestunia?
Tales of Bestunia is a fantasy story in which everyone is born with a spiritual companion. And the spiritual companion is a creature that walks with you through life and is constantly mirroring back to you and reminding you what your purpose is in life. Until the deity who has been bestowing these spiritual companions on people upon birth seems to be preoccupied. Something's going on, takes his eye off the ball. He's distracted. Maybe he's imprisoned. Maybe he's dead. Who knows? And people start to be born steadily without callings. Thus introduces the no beasts. And you take a world that has progressed very rapidly from like barbarian tribes into high society, and you begin to see the cracks of this high society begin to form. It's a story of a girl, her dad, her friends, finding themselves in a position of destiny and seeing if they can usher in order once more, or if we'll watch the world collapse into ruin.
Love that. All right. I really like how it's like it's a way to having a calling in your life is a way to constantly remind yourself your calling, or like, what is my life's purpose? And it's reminded to you constantly, right? Yeah. Next question. This goes along the lines of, I'm going to say, what have we been doing, right? But for the month of March, right, which was mostly me, but I would love to know how you would describe it from afar. What have you been doing? What have we been doing the past month to extend this reach?
Yeah, as we have realized the investment required in creating comic books, and we turn to community in order to help us create our dream. It forced us to reconcile the fact that we never really wanted to do something that was just purely, solely, exclusively ours, and that the teachers in us that want to teach through experience, that want to teach by sharing the things that we love, want to bring as many people in as possible. And that was a necessity if we were going to go to our communities and say, help us build this thing, is it was, let's build this thing together. And so through Kickstarters, you mentioned this before, but our previous Kickstarter, one of the options for backing the project was uh, to invest in our ability to bring books and go teach a creativity workshop in local schools. So thus sort of burgeons in this era of we are an imagination incubator
Love that word.
that in recognizing the value of creativity and imagination in our own lives, seek to nurture that spirit, that muscle, if you will, in kids, and really just delight the inner children within people of all ages, so that they can take this thing throughout their life and never be too conformed to the rigid, highly serious um, adult world, but instead stay childlike.
I like that answer. I want to touch on it. And then what is it that we do with kids? So that would be the other question. Is like what
Yeah,
experience do these kids get with us?
the
And then I want
reason
to touch on
so
something.
yeah, man. There was a time when I was walking in the woods and I came to this pond. It was shortly after you, shortly after you asked me if I wanted to be involved in working with you on a fantasy project. Hey, Matt, you want to write this book for me? No,
I was gonna say he
I
said
don't.
no. You said no for like a year or two before we did this.
Yep, yeah. And not sure what exactly shifted, but I think I really came to understand what the framework of callings, the power of the framework of the calling. It's, if everybody in a world is born with a spirit companion, a calling, and they come in these basically three different types: an explorer, a builder, and a defender. Uh, this idea, this ability to see myself immediately in this world through the question of like, oh shoot, if I was a character in this world, what would my calling look like? Okay, if it was a wolf that had this great rack of antlers, I might change the wording when I describe that in the future.
Thank you.
Then where would it live? What would it do? What would its preferences be? What does that say about me? And I start to see myself in this fantasy world. I start to feel like a character in it. And I think if that same experience can be given to kids, hey, as you look into your own life, what path are you walking right now? That of the explorer, that of the builder, that of the defender. Then that kid starts to consider, what is important to me right now? What do I like? Am I somebody that wants to create things? Am I somebody that wants to learn and grow and get out of this comfort zone? Am I somebody that feels a need to look after something, someone? You just get a sense of a kid's values, and immediately, like, who doesn't love the idea of having? I mean, we all love our pets. Who doesn't love the idea of literally having ever since Golden Compass for me, like the idea of having a companion, this creature with me. So I think it's such an intoxicating idea to imagine going through life with your from birth till death with your best friend, and someone that you're like soulfully connected to. Uh, Imaginary friend, your beast. That's Kids are immediately going to want to see themselves in the world and start creating themselves in the world and picturing themselves as characters.
Such a cool concept because it's like it starts with like a act of self-expression and just like making up a calling, right? We go into these schools and these kids get to describe and then draw their calling and then talk about what's important in it and say it out loud to other people. So you have like this self-awareness that comes with it, social awareness because they get to share it with a friend and they get to say it out loud and they get to brag about it. And then like you're saying, that last part is then like this act of then being able to like create and potentially see it come to life in pages of our books, whether in like a picture in a novel, whether in a short story that we do, whether in a comic, whether in like a poster that we'll do in Kickstarters in the future, or they get to create it themselves. If they're like, I actually want to start talking about, I want to write a little story of where my calling and I would live in this world. It's like self-awareness, social awareness, imagination, creativity, like almost in that order.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said this on our last one, but one of the schools I went to, I may have just been talking about this, not in a live, but just to you guys. You know, I went into one of these classes and I spoke with their 2nd grade to 5th grade. And all the kids are excited, and I'm always asking questions, and I'm describing the builders and the explorers and the defenders. And then I'm asking them, like, hey, what path are you walking right now? You might walk all these paths in your life, but what path are you walking right now? And some of these kids are coming in, they have like compression vests on, right? Because it helps them with their anxiety. Another kid had like headphones on because it helps him. He just learns differently. And I'm still trying to scan the. Another kid was like had a cochlear plant here that was like, and then I had to speak into something that helped him hear. I never saw this really growing up. But as I asked these questions, every kid's raising their hand, and the one kid that had headphones on put his hands up, and he's like, I said, what path are you walking and why? And he's like, well, I'm an explorer, the explorer path right now. And he's like, because I want to get better at getting outside my comfort zone and like trying new things. I thought nothing of it at that time. And I'm like, that's awesome, man. And like, who else wants to go? And later these kids are drawing, they're calling, and I'm walking around and I'm like answering questions of the kids. And I'm looking to see if the teachers have any questions. I had a teacher come up to me and she goes, hey, I just want to let you know, you're the first person, I'm not going to say his name. She's like, you're the first person this kid has talked to. That's not me since he's been at this school. And I'm like, and he had an answer of like getting outside his comfort zone. So it's so weird that, it's so weird that something so simple allows people to like step into their awareness more. I was talking to our head of sales at the company that I work for now, and someone else on the team was telling him about my comics, and he came up to me. He's like, so tell me about these 3 paths. And I was jacked to be like, all right, how much time you got? So I started telling him, he's like, it'd be really cool to just see where our sales reps fit. Evan, you've talked about this and how this could be used in like corporate events. And what he said is, he's like, instead of them taking a personality test, like an Myers-Briggs, where you have like 60 questions that are like high analysis of self, like who am I, this or am I this? He's like, it's a fun question that like they almost like take themselves out of it for a minute and they just tap into the fantasy aspect of it to help them understand themselves. Like it's almost like an easier in to self-awareness rather than this long test. I never looked at it that way. But I'm really excited to see what it leads to. A couple of more questions while Evan finishes up. I don't know if one of y'all have background. It's probably Matt, Sig Scroff and Sonk. Okay. Evan, you're amazing, by the way. Last 2 questions. How do you see this movement? Like, why do you see this being so vital for the next generation? Shout out Kevin.
I love this question.
Yeah, shout out Kevin.
Yeah. By the way, whatever you're doing with the illustration right now gives me like eye doctor. Is he like number 1 or number 2? So this my answer says,
shut up. We're trying to do a Facebook Live over here.
People laughing. How good. They have a good time.
How dare you have
yeah. So this answer, I was watching a video by, what's his name? John Cleese. I don't know if you really like this video or if you've come around to this video since you originally didn't like it, but I think this, why I think this is so valuable. I feel like generally creativity and imagination, artistic ability, it's like, what, if you have it, what do you do with it? And I think most people just in general knee-jerk reaction will say, are you creative? Like, what do you paint? And that's sort of like what creativity is touted as. Like, well, if you're really creative, you might, artistic, you might paint something, you might create something. But I think we've diminished the idea of creativity into that when it really shows up everywhere. Like um, when I write a story, one of my tactics to write my stories is to put my characters into circumstances that I have no idea how I'm going to get them out of these circumstances.
Mm.
And I might go for a walk. I might stew on the problem that I've created for myself for like 2 or 3 days. And nobody's going to get hurt. There's no consequence if I don't figure this out. Worst case scenario, if I never do, I'll just delete the scene and I'll go back and I'll take them out of the trap. But that almost never happens. The reason I think it almost never happens is I've been doing this for myself for 20, 17 years or something like this. And this exercise of deliberately creating a challenge, deliberately planting myself in discomfort, and then I want to be there. I will sit in this discomfort for days at a time, trying to figure out a creative solution through it. If you were to take a kid and you were to say, we are going to practice making you uncomfortable, we're going to practice forcing you to come up with creative solutions to get yourself out of these dilemmas. And that just became something that a kid was just so familiar with. And as they go through life, they're like, oh, yeah, I faced a lot of discomfort. I faced a lot of rejection. But it was always in this like very non traumatizing, gamified, really fun. It's like an escape room, like an escape room in your own mind. It's so fun. And I think that skill will show up in every decision that a child ever makes. Like, I'm not going to go knee jerk reaction first thing that I think of here, unless this is something that I've determined through practice, through trial and error, to be the decision that gets me the result I want. Instead, though, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna allow a better decision to possibly present itself, thinking creatively through some of these processes that have been hard gleaned over years of practice, and find themselves going a route that is uniquely theirs, not just the one that is most acceptable to society.
It's like creative problem solving, but doing it in a fun way for this next generation to just think differently about life circumstances as they hit us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm sorry for that. I think someone came into the room. So we're going to go last question. And thank you for that, Matt. I like the way you look at things. Last question is going to go to Evan because he's been drawing. He's been drawing this whole time. We're going to give Evan a philosophical question. I'm excited. It was the last question that Kevin asked me. First off, can we give it up for Evan? He just sit in his drawn masterpieces for gets an hour. That's all he gets.
Franklin in the foreground.
Yeah, I had to draw a bird.
Oh yeah,
I just had to.
It's a gull-like calling. Evan, for you, what's the last question that I got is like at the end of the day, for you, what's at the heart of all this?
Can you say that differently?
No, because that's the way he asked me. When you think about what we're building and what we're creating and why we're creating it for you, right? Subjective answer. What for you is at the heart of it all? You didn't, just so you know, you did not have to continue on. Evan and I were talking. We're not going to say the reason. Evan had like a moment of potential cold feet early on in this process. He's like, you know what? I want to stick around. What made you, like for you, what's at the heart of what we're building at Unfound Adventures?
I mean, honestly, it's pretty much what has already been said, which is the goal of inspiring creativity, especially at an early age. It's not creativity isn't something that just happens, or rather it does, but it's not something that is talent based. And I hear people say that a lot about whether it's creativity in general or creative acts like writing, painting, music. They always say, oh, you got so much talent. And it's like, okay, maybe you do, in the sense that you have an aptitude at an earlier age that other people don't necessarily have, but it's not some mutually exclusive ability where either you have it or you don't. Whether it's drawing, writing, music, anything. They are skills that can be developed and trained, and creativity is one as well. It's not that easy to sit a child down and ask them to make up a story for you on the spot. For some children, it's easier than others, but for most, and certainly for me as a child, it is not easy. It's not a simple task. And that's the same could be said for looking at a blank page of sheet music, a blank Word document, whatever it is, without some kind of impetus or parameters or guidelines. It's just infinitely harder to take that first step and just keep moving, to get something done, to make something and get it out there. And so this really gives kids, or anyone really, the framework to inhabit a different world, inhabit different characters, to really engage with sensibilities, with choices, with narrative arcs that they wouldn't otherwise. For me, I have a lot of background with working in tabletop role playing games. I never played them. I've played D&D exactly once at a work function, but I work with them a lot, and it's because I really, really enjoy and appreciate the medium and what it does for people. And it's only recently that I came to the realization that painting, art, illustration these days, now that I am full-time an engineer, I'm no longer a full-time artist. It is my form of role play. It's my form of escapism. It's my form of being the person that I want to spend more time being, and that I can't necessarily be in the course of my day job. And you'll find that common theme among a lot of role players, not necessarily that they're being who they want to be, but they're being different people so that they can explore different aspects of themselves, or different aspects of how they approach problems, how they approach stories. And art for me is really just, it's that side of my toolbox, I guess, right now. I don't know if that answers the question.
Oh, it
I don't
does.
even remember what the question was.
The question was, what's your name again? No. Thank you for that. And it just gave me an idea. So I was writing down. Thank you for that. You both said the word escape, and Matt knows this because I used to say this at our last job when I would talk to fiction authors, and they're like, why are you writing fiction? And I used to say, I'm an escapist that's just trying to reach other escapists. Like, it's just like, I think that's what fantasy and what fiction and what make-believe allows us to do, and what worlds like this allows us to do. Escape into this and find yourself. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate working with both of y'all. Really appreciate all that stayed here to listen. Thank you for the kind words, Donna Lisa. It means a lot. And anyone here, if you'd like to continue to support what we're doing for the next generation and the current generation, feel free to reach out. We have a next Kickstarter launching. It's going to be in a couple of months. We pushed it back a little bit. It was going to be in like May. I think it's going to be more towards July now, or a little bit later. We have a TTRPG hopefully in the works for either later this year or early next year. But you can always reach out. You can always sponsor a classroom visit in between Kickstarters. You can go to our website, unfoundadventures.com. You can pick up books. You can pick up maps. You can get a calling creation either for yourself, or you can donate it to somebody else. That's always going on. Feel free to do it, unfoundadventures.com. Thank you so much for watching this another Facebook Live where we do some landscape drawings for an upcoming novel. If you have any questions, if you have any statements, if you want to ask us our views on authority, put it in our Facebook group, and we will do our best to answer in a good frame of mind. So thank you all. We will see you Go Red Wings. We will see you all in 2 weeks, and we don't know what we'll be drawing yet, but we will let you know. Y'all take care.